One of the best parts of having New England boiled dinner is making hash afterwards. If you use corned beef, you make corned beef hash. But if you added beets, you get Red Flannel Hash, a New England tradition. I can't make New England boiled dinner in my mess kit, but I can make the hash. Stick around and I'll share the recipe, plus an iconic camping shirt and New England Textiles.
Corned beef hash has been a long time leftover breakfast from New England boiled dinner. I'm going to put together a recipe for corned beef hash with a New England flair. Around here, we make red flannel hash, and I'll tell you how that's different. So here are the ingredients you're going to need to make red flannel hash. The first item is a small can of corned beef. This is a 4.25 ounce can of corned beef spread. You're next going to need a third of a cup of potato flakes. This is the potato flakes. We're just going to put those right into our bag. Into that bag, we're going to add 1/4 of a teaspoon of onion powder, a half a teaspoon of butter flakes, and a dash of black pepper. So seal that up. And the last thing that we're going to need that makes this red flannel hash is beets. Now these are pickled beets. I haven't yet been able to find just regular beets, but pickled beets works fine. It's not a traditional New England meal, but it gives it that New England flair. We'll take our paper bag. I've marked it corned beef hash. Into it, we're going to put the beets, the can of corned beef spread, and our potato mixture. We're ready to go out into the field and make a red flannel hash for breakfast. I'll see you in the cabin.
One of the stories behind the name is that up in Vermont during the American Revolution, Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys got so hungry that they threw their red flannels in with their potatoes to make a hash. This is, of course, nonsense. No decent Yankee, even from Vermont, is going to trade the warmth of flannel for a mediocre meal. When I hear the term red flannel, I conjure up a picture of the drop-back Union suit worn by prospectors in the old westerns. But the undergarment was actually originally designed in 1868 for women as a protest to corsets and restrictive clothing. Despite flannel having been around as a working men's shirt from Wales in the 17th century, it wasn't until Hamilton Carhart started selling workwear from his small shop in Detroit, Michigan in the late 1880s that flannel became more mainstream. Recognized for its ability to retain heat in cold weather, once the November chill hits in the Northeast, the light cotton bedding gets replaced with warm, soft flannel sheets for those long, frosty winter nights while waiting for the spring thaw. Now, you know.
To make the corned beef hash, we'll take out our ingredients. We have a can of corned beef. We have corned beef hash mix. set the bag aside. So to start, we're going to essentially make the instant mashed potatoes, and then we'll add in the canned corned beef in a moment. We'll take our measuring cup and we're going to measure out 1/3 of a cup of water. Now these cups don't have a 1/3 measurement, but a third is between a quarter and a half. I'm going to take my small pot, pour the water in. I'll light the stove. Put the pot on with a cover and let that heat to a boil.
Take a moment and consider the clothes you're wearing right now. If you're watching this video in your birthday suit, put on a sweater. I'm cold. All of the fabrics were once raw material, maybe cotton, wool, some type of synthetic, metal, I don't judge. And it was manipulated, knitted, crocheted, or woven into a textile that could be cut and sewn into a garment. During American colonial times, this process happened on spinning wheels, where the wool, cotton, or flax fibers were twisted into threads that were next woven into cloth on small looms. These fabrics were referred to as homespun. Around 1769, in England, Richard Arkwright invented a spinning machine that would replace human fingers in the process. This improved the uniformity and quality of cloth and was a closely guarded secret, with laws prohibiting the export of machines and people with this knowledge. 20 years later, 1789, Samuel Slater, now 21, having been apprenticed for 7 years following his father's death at the Cromford Mill in Derbyshire, England, was working for Jedediah Strutt. Aware that his skills could be of great value in the recently separated American colonies, Slater memorized the designs and mechanics of the machines at the mill and set off for Rhode Island, risking fines and potential imprisonment if caught by the king. Sam contracted with Moses Brown in Patuxent, Rhode Island, the following year to get a mill functional that Brown had purchased with his cousin and son-in-law, but was unable to make it work. Putting his experience and skills to the test, Slater was able to get the system functional and founded the first viable textile mill in the United States on the Blackstone River. Slater then went on to build several textile mills in the Massachusetts town he founded and named for his friend, Senator Daniel Webster. Samuel Slater died in Webster, Massachusetts in 1835 at the age of 66. Water was the driving force used to power the machinery needed to convert raw materials into threads, then into cloth, and the rivers of New England were perfect for building the mills that could turn out those textiles. All of the tasks, however, took place in separate locations. When President Jefferson signed the Embargo Act into law in 1807, it was an attempt to force France and England to recognize the newly formed USA's desire to remain neutral in the Napoleonic Wars, but it had a devastating effect on New England's merchants, who relied on foreign trade. Nevertheless, Yankee perspicacity prevailed in that the Embargo Act also removed competition from England for textiles. Francis Cabot Lowell was a Boston merchant whose focus had been on silks and teas from the Far East, then on rum distilling, bringing molasses from the Caribbean. The Embargo Act severely disrupted Lowell's ability to operate, and, citing poor health, he and his family visited Great Britain. While there, he, like Slater, made observations on the inner workings of the textile production in Lancashire and Scotland. When he returned home after a 2-year stint, Lowell was ready to put a plan into action. Gaining financial backing from former merchants and businessmen, Lowell set out to create a textile factory along the Charles River in Waltham, Massachusetts. In 1814, this was the first time that all of the tasks required to create cloth from raw materials was brought under one roof. The partnership grew to become known as the Boston Associates. This group grew rich and powerful, controlling most of the textile production in New England. Around 1822, when the Charles River was insufficient to power the large amount of equipment, the spinning machines and looms were moved to the Merrimack River. The city of Lowell was named to honor Francis, who had passed away in 1817, in recognition of his achievement in creating the Boston Manufacturing Company. Further downstream, another textile tycoon, Abbott Lawrence, set up mills in the city that is now named for him. I should mention that wind was also a source of power for mills in grinding, but not so much in textile production. The reliance on a breeze was insufficient to overcome the need for aggressive output to turn the machinery. Even water power was limited if the rivers were lowered due to a drought. Richard Arkwright, in 1777, installed a steam engine to pump water into his mill pond, keeping the level sufficient to turn the factory water wheels. But this engine was never actually used in the manufacturing process. In the late 1700s, New England native Eli Whitney had developed a hand-cranked engine to remove the seeds from cotton, improving the speed at which raw material could be initially refined. By the 1840s, however, steam had been developed to the point that it could drive the cotton gins from around 55 pounds per day with a hand crank to over 2,500 pounds per day with steam. The southern cotton found a ready market in the northeast mills, but these were still reliant on water power until a former mariner out of Salem, Massachusetts, by the name of Nathaniel Griffin, saw the possibility of using steam engines to power the spinning machines and looms, thus eliminating the need for building alongside a river. The Naumkeag Steam Cotton Company, which had opened in the 1840s, survived a Great Fire in 1914, but was unable to compete with workers who wanted better living wages following World War II, and decided to move the manufacturing closer to the resources in the South and out of New England. This process was repeated by numbers of other manufacturers as well, leaving textile mills abandoned along the rivers of New England cities and towns from Connecticut and Rhode Island to northern Maine. Many of these brick behemoths lay dormant for years, but have slowly been converted to shops, museums, apartments, and high-end condos, breathing new life into once derelict communities. Now you know.
It doesn't take very long for that water to boil. Use a pot holder, remove the pot from the fire, turn that off. Then using your fork, pour the potato mixture right into the water and gently fold that with your fork until all of the potato flakes are completely covered. Now what you essentially have is mashed potatoes. So then open your can of corned beef. This is just a small amount, but it works really well with this particular recipe. And once again, you're just going to fold all of that corned beef, mashing it in with the fork, to the potatoes. And there is the corned beef hash. Well, here in New England, we add a little bit extra to it. We have beets. These are pickled beets. I'm going to drain these off, and then I'm going to put those right in to make what's called red flannel hash. We'll relight the stove. And heat that hash through. That'll probably take about 2 minutes to come back up to temperature. So this does require some constant attention so that you don't burn the bottom of the pan. Continually folding that through until it's all hot. And I am going to just set that aside for a moment. And I'll plate it up in just a minute.
Producing flannel cloth is still only part of the story. To be practical, that textile must be fabricated into a functional item. This portion of the finished product was greatly enhanced by yet another New England inventor, Elias Howe, who, around 1845, invented a machine that could sew fabric 5 times faster than the quickest hand stitchers. 5 years later, Isaac Merritt Singer would develop his version of the sewing machine at a small shop in Boston that would forever change how clothes were made at home and manufactured for retail. By far, the most iconic camping garment is a flannel shirt. There's a company out of Fall River, Mass. that has been manufacturing shirts since 1933. The New England Shirt Company claims it is the oldest ready-to-wear shirt manufacturer in America. They purchased their cloth from another New England business, the American Woolen Company of Stafford Springs, Connecticut, which opened just over 10 years ago in a historic mill building along the Willimantic River. Together, these two companies are working to bring the textile industry back to the Northeast. Until I started working on this video, I was unaware that I could even buy shirts still made in the USA, never mind New England. Back in the 90s, my American-made Union polo shirt was one of the most comfortable I've ever owned. I'll be honest though, it's the prices that are a little uncomfortable. However, for a quality, well-made garment that supports American workers, I feel it's important to put my money where my mouth is. Remember, value is so much more than just a cheap price. Keep watching future videos. I just purchased a red flannel shirt jack from the New England Shirt Company, made from American Woolen Company fabric. On winter clearance, of course. Now, you know.
Grab a plate. And just serve. So I'm going to grab a small spatula that I have. Get the rest of that corned beef hash out of the pan. Red Flannel Hash. Hope you've enjoyed me making red flannel hash with corned beef. If you do, please give the video a thumbs up, share it on your social media, and subscribe to my channel. I'd really appreciate that. Don't forget, clean up your mess.